Once upon a time, in a beautiful kingdom with large green hills, there lived a princess named Zara. She was known far and wide for her dazzling beauty, but what set her apart the most was her hair. Zara's hair was long, thick, and a radiant mass of soft, bouncy curls, an extraordinary hair that shone in the sun. It cascaded down her back like a waterfall, and wherever she went, people couldn't help but admire it. But Zara's beauty had made her proud. She was not only proud of her appearance, she flaunted it at every opportunity. Instead of using her beauty to inspire kindness, she used it to mock others. She loved walking through the village where the poor and struggling people lived, just to show off. She would laugh at those who didn't look as she did, pointing out their flaws in cruel ways. The villagers were afraid of her and her sharp tongue, knowing that she would insult anyone she crossed paths with. "Look at that man's crooked nose," she would laugh to her maidens as they passed by. "And that woman's wrinkled face. How do they even stand to look in the mirror?" Her laughter would echo through the village, leaving hurt feelings and bitter tears in its wake. One day, as she strolled through the village with her maids, looking for someone new to mock, her eyes fell upon an old woman selling oranges by the corner. The old woman had a hunched back, and worst of all, she was completely bald. The woman's head gleamed in the sunlight, and her aged hands were busy arranging the oranges on her small table. Zara stopped in her tracks, her lips curling into a cruel smile. She whispered something to her maidens, who giggled nervously, unsure of what she was about to do. "Old woman!" Zara called, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tell me, did your hair run away because it was embarrassed to sit on such a hideous head?" The villagers gasped, horrified by the princess's words. The old woman looked up at Zara, her wrinkled face calm, but her eyes gleaming with an unsettling light. She stood up slowly and walked toward the princess. "Princess Zara," the old woman said in a voice that was soft but firm, "beauty is a fleeting thing, but cruelty mars the heart forever. Be careful, for one day you might find that your own beauty fades just as quickly." Zara's laugh was harsh and cold. "My beauty fade? Impossible. I am the most beautiful woman in the kingdom, and nothing can change that." The old woman smiled slightly. "We shall see," she mumbled. "We shall see." That night, Zara went to bed still laughing at the poor old woman and her bald head, thinking nothing of her warning. But when she woke up the next morning and reached up to stroke her beautiful curls, she felt nothing. Panicked, she jumped out of bed and ran to the mirror. Her heart nearly stopped. Her head was as bald as a stone. Every last strand of her magnificent hair had disappeared overnight. She screamed, her voice echoing through the palace as she frantically touched her head, hoping it was a horrible nightmare. But it was real. Princess Zara was bald. Zara's cries summoned the servants, who rushed into her chambers and gasped when they saw her. "What has happened to me?" Zara shrieked. "Where is my hair?" Her father, the king, was immediately informed, and soon the entire palace was in an uproar. They called for the best sorcerers, healers, and potion makers from all corners of the kingdom. They tried every remedy, magical creams, enchanted oils, powerful spells, but nothing worked. Zara remained as bald as the day she was born. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Zara refused to leave her chambers, ashamed of her appearance. Gone were her proud walks through the village, gone was her mocking laughter. The village was peaceful, and people walked the streets without being terrified of running into her. She hid from everyone, embarrassed and angry. She missed her hair so much. It felt like a part of her soul had been taken away. But no matter how much she wept or raged, her hair did not return. One day, as she sat in her room staring at herself in the mirror, she suddenly remembered the old bald woman from the village. The memory hit her like a lightning bolt. The woman had warned her. What if this baldness was a curse for her cruelty? Zara knew she had to find the old woman, even if it meant going back to the village where she had once mocked and scorned everyone. She had no choice. She covered her bald head with a scarf and, for the first time in many months, ventured out of the palace. When Zara arrived in the village, the people were shocked to see her. They had not seen the princess in so long, and now, seeing her without her beautiful hair, they barely recognized her. She looked humble, small, and uncertain, not the proud, arrogant girl they once feared. Zara walked through the market, asking for the old woman who sold oranges. Finally, someone pointed her to a small house at the edge of the village. Zara approached the house, her heart pounding. She knocked on the door, and after a moment, the old woman appeared, just as Zara remembered her, bald and wise-looking, with eyes that seemed to see into her soul. "I've been expecting you," the old woman said with a knowing smile. Zara's face flushed with shame. "Please," she whispered. "I know I was cruel to you, and I mocked you without thinking. Now I am suffering because of my pride. I beg you, please lift the curse and return my hair." The old woman gazed at her for a long time before speaking. "Princess, you were blinded by your beauty, and you used it to hurt others. Now that you are no longer blinded, you have a choice. You can choose to be humble and kind, or you can continue down the path you were on." Zara felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had been so proud, so heartless. She had never considered the pain she caused others with her words. Now, standing before the old woman, bald and vulnerable, she realized how wrong she had been. "I've learned my lesson," Zara said, her voice trembling. "I see now that beauty is nothing without kindness. I promise I will change. I will be good to people from now on, with or without my hair." The old woman nodded, her expression softening. "I believe you," she said. "But know this, Princess Zara, you will remain bald for a time to remind you of the lesson you have learned. Only when your heart has truly changed will your hair return." Zara bowed her head, feeling both sorrow and relief. She thanked the old woman and returned to the palace, determined to keep her promise. In the months that followed, Zara became a totally different person. No longer did she mock villagers or flaunt her beauty. She walked through the village, not to insult, but to help. She spoke kindly to the people she had once belittled, offering apologies and assistance where she could. She spent time with the poor and the elderly, learning their stories and sharing her own. Slowly, the villagers began to see a new side of her, a kinder princess. Zara's heart softened as she realized the true value of humility and compassion. She no longer cared about being the most beautiful, she cared about being the most kind. The villagers, who once feared her, now began to admire her for her generosity and her willingness to change. Then, one morning, Zara woke up and reached for her head, as she had done every morning since her curse. Her hand touched something soft and familiar. She rushed to the mirror, and to her astonishment, her beautiful hair had returned. Her hair was just as thick, long, and radiant as before, but this time, Zara smiled at herself for a different reason. She knew now that true beauty wasn't in her hair or her looks, it was in her heart. From that day forward, Princess Zara was known not only for her beauty but for her kindness and grace. She ruled the kingdom with a loving heart, and the people adored her. And though her hair was still admired by all, it was her newfound humility that truly made her shine. I hope you learned something from this story. Please, if you haven't subscribed, kindly click on the subscribe button. Be a part of my growth. Turn on the notifications so that when I post more interesting stories, you'll be the first to get them. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for your consistent support.